Pardon me, are you Adam Graham?
The very same. And this is my old-time radio snack wagon.
Welcome to the Old-Time Radio Snack Wagon, where we serve up a bite-sized portion of old-time radio. And now, here's your Snack Wagon host, Adam Graham.
Today, we're serving up a double portion of the Passing Parade with John Nesbitt. I was thinking of sharing one specific story from the Passing Parade, and in my search, I found the wrong one. But then I realized, even though that wasn't what I was looking for, and the one that I was looking for aired 4 months later, the stories fit together and had similar thoughts behind them. And this was during a time when Nesbitt's Passing Parade was a feature on the show of that great baritone John Charles Thomas. And these segments were a little bit shorter, and I think I can easily fit both of them into the format of our old-time radio snack wagon. John Nesbitt and most of the people in old-time radio are from another time. But really, they weren't formed by or created by the world of the 1940s and 50s. That's the world they helped make. They experienced life before that and lived in a world that was even more different than that of the 40s and 50s. And that world was changed before their eyes, and World War II sped up that change. So here now are two segments of the Passing Parade on that theme with John Nesbitt from the John Charles Thomas Show, with the stories The Hired Girl and Old Town from June 4th and then October 15th of 1944.
No, Nora, nobody but you, dear. You know, Nora, that I stick like glue, dear. And would I trade you for Venus? No, Nora, no.
For the past year, John Nesbitt has been parading past our microphones a procession of the great people of the world. Today, however, his chief character is not high up in the ladder of fame at all. And yet I prophesy that most of us know her very well. But that's a matter for John Nesbitt.
Now that hiring somebody to do your housework for you is just one of those dim memories of the past, we got to thinking that it was about time that the old hired girl was given a special citation in our Passing Parade. Maybe it's about time that somebody told her story, the story of the hired girl. And her name, you'll remember, was usually Nora or Bridget or Annie or Helga or Lizzie or even Katinka. From a San Francisco newspaper for the year 1910, I copied this want ad. Wanted, good, strong girl. Must be regular churchgoer. No visitors permitted. Cook, care of children, laundry and sewing, downstairs cleaning. Send photograph, birth certificate, or immigration papers. Wages $8 per month and found. Now, if a hired girl came to the city to work, she got better wages. But behind her, she left the sunlight and the clean air and much of the dignity that she could know on a farm. And we didn't call Helga or Annie a hired girl in the city. We called her our parlor maid because it sounded fancier that way. Beat out the carpets with the big wicker swatter of the old broom, Lizzie. Shake the dirt out of the velvet drapes, Olga. Get up on the ladder and climb up and dust off the chandeliers, Bridget. And then after you've given the children their breakfast, take my husband's tray up to him. Boil the linen and hang out the wash, Nora, or else what are we paying you $15 a month for? Now, there was one hired girl, and this piece is really dedicated to her in love and dear memory, who came straight off the boat to our old-fashioned house in Boston just before the last war. And she was the last of a long line of Lizzies and Olgas and Bridgets, none of whom had been able to survive the fact that the four boys were in a kind of hero worship stage, our heroes being the Cats and Jammer kids in the funny papers. So we considered that a giant firecracker tossed under the maid's bed was always good for a laugh, and from time to time we little angels would lug home a large snapping turtle from the public reservoir, and just for safekeeping, you understand, we would put it into the maid's bed. All of that, I wish to report, however, was before the entry into our lives of a Swedish girl whose name was Effie. Effie was tall and clean and blue-eyed, and she had a mouthful of gold teeth of which she was very proud, and she had a ringing, hearty laugh that would start the dishes shaking on the table, and she had an irresistible joy of life that filled the old-fashioned house like music. Effie arrived on a blistering hot day one August, and by afternoon she was already hard at work, hosing down the back porch to cool off the kitchen. And so this seemed a suitable occasion for us to install over the slightly ajar screen door 1 bucket of water, which was scheduled when Effie came back in and opened the door to deposit 3 gallons of water upon her head. We considered this a very neat engineering job and a suitable initiation into our home for Effie. Just as we were completing this installation, however, there was a roar of laughter behind us, and we realized that Effie herself had arrived with the running hose still in her hand. "Holy mucky," I said, "my brother, we've been ambushed." And thereupon a water fight raged over the back porch that made history. We made a mass frontal attack at one point in the battle in an attempt to get the hose away from Effie, which resulted in the hoses exploding midway and drenching all of us to the skin. But 30 minutes later, helpless with laughter and still very wet, we formed a committee of appeal to our parents to keep Effie from being told to pack her box and leave at once. Effie had the stuff, you see. Effie was a champion in her own right, and there was no more monkey business. Within a week, she had us fighting among ourselves over the privilege of helping her wipe the dishes. And we were such reformed characters that the only relapse into our old evil ways that I can recall occurred on the occasion in which we stole the shoes of her policeman friend, a gentleman who used to drop into the kitchen after supper and slip his brogans off under the table while eating Effie's apple cake and smorgasbord. 809 plates of apple cake later, Effie married the policeman, and she now lives in Boston with 3 fine sons in the Navy. She was only a hired girl, and yet her laughter rang through the sunlit years of our childhood, and with the dignity of honest work, she could turn the humble kitchen into the studio of an artist. So hail and farewell, Effie. The hired girl, Nellie, or Annie, or Helga, or Effie, has with this war begun to disappear, perhaps forever. And we wish her happiness, because her life was seldom a very happy one. And in her place, the tireless electrical servants do await us all tomorrow. So it's a fair exchange. A new standard of luxury for us, and a chance for the family drudge, the hired girl, to raise her head from the laundry tubs now and then and take a good look at the sky. 3 weeks ago, driving back home from a big, barren, ultra-modern military camp where I'd been doing some work, I stopped on Highway 101 by a sign that I've been passing for years. 1 mile, it says, to Old Town. Now, they have told me that Old Town is one of the beautiful villages of America. And so, while the garage was fixing a flat and putting on the spare, I walked down the road to Old Town. And that mile of winding dirt road carried me back for 30 years, clear back to childhood. For Old Town is a village that time has passed by since about 1905. And there stands the steepled church today, dazzling white with new paint, and the lazy river choked with willows lies out there a stone's throw across the barley fields. And the old general store is set high up above Main Street so that you can back your wagon up to the porch before it. And the wooden schoolhouse has its granite cornerstone that's proudly labeled, built by public subscription 1893. Strolling slowly along the wooden walks and going around the sycamores that grew right up through the boards and watching some kids in faded blue overalls playing one-a-cat down the street, I must confess that I suddenly landed in one of those moods that are as sentimental as an Irving Berlin waltz. And I began thinking, why can't we all go back home again to you, Old Town? Whether we called you Old Town or Riverdale or Junctionville or Pleasant Valley or Parsons Corners. Whatever your name, you were a place where we lived out our lives in peace and simplicity. and where we knew each other's every fault and virtue, and where we gossiped a lot, but always helped each other when the trouble came. You, Old Town, are the dim, lost place where I carried Mary Jones' books to school along these wooden walks, and hooked catfish out of the quiet pool above the dam. Your shady streets were lined with tidy little houses, each guarded by its white picket fence, and its veranda cool in the shade of the Cecil Bruner. Sturdy little houses, built to outlast time, set on great granite blocks chiseled with careful pains from the quarry down below town. And if you climbed the steep attic stairs from the great bleak kitchen below, you could see the hand-hewn beams pegged together with patience and skill, as if their builders had said, "Here in this house many generations shall live exactly as I have lived, to know the grateful warmth of shelter after a day of toil, and the lazy, friendly ticking of the hall clock, and the calm of night when you looked up through the clean air to see the stars." Can we never go back home again to you, Old Town, and leave today with its flaming wars and roar of noise and crash of giant machines? Must the clean smell of clover be drowned in the fumes of gasoline, and the quiet stars lost in a cloud of smoke? Can we never go back home to yesterday? And then I left the tree-shaded streets of Old Town and walked back to the great modern highway humming with traffic, and I began to remember something else about Old Town, something else beside the slow, cool river and walking home with Mary Jones. That 40 years ago, when villages like Old Town flourished in our land, in those sturdy, rose-draped houses that look so quaint and inviting, there also lived so much human misery that it would shock us into silence today. That one person in every 30, for example, died of typhoid caused by polluted water systems or no water system at all, and that every winter 105,000 old folk died from pneumonia in those damp and badly heated rooms, and that tuberculosis raged unchecked in the sunless houses, and that women bore their children in unspeakable agony or lost them while the doctor without telephone was being brought by a boy on a farm horse over the dark and muddy fields, and that ignorance killed helpless millions because no public library stood with open doors on Main Street, and no radio sent new calls to learning crackling through the sky, that the poor were paupers and we expected them to be grateful just to be kept alive, that a hired girl in 1905 got $8 a month and a room in the attic, and that men's wives turned from pretty girls of 17 into bent-bodied, exhausted middle age at 35, eyes dimmed from sewing by the kerosene lamp, and aching backs from doggedly pounding dirty clothing at sinks in the cellar, and the skin of their hands and faces hard and seamed as old parchment from the blaze of heat from the coal range in that pine-floored kitchen. Yet there was beauty in Old Town, and there was kindliness there, and patient and peaceful sunny afternoons, but there was never the leisure to enjoy them, for it was also a trap that held us in the grip of hard, relentless labor from dawn to dark. More changes yet are ahead of us all, more things done by the machine, and more hours of freedom to study and grow and search for happiness in Newtown, where our children will live their lives tomorrow. A Newtown, glistening and modern, ablaze with light, still needs to grow gracefully old, we'll admit. We've got to handle these fine, shining automobiles that have turned Main Street into a parking lot, and we've got to find ways to let the elm trees grow tall and mighty along the walks again. But we can't go home again, not you and I. No pathway leads back to yesterday, and the gate is locked, and we lost the keys the day we entered this century of change. And it's goodbye, Old Town, and Mary Jones and the dusty roads, and the hired girl hanging out the clothes to dry, for the sign points forward, and we would never really go back to you again, Old Town, even if we could find the lost way.
Welcome back. What I appreciate about Nesbitt is his very unique way of honoring the past and understanding what was beautiful and charming about it, but leading the audience to a point of moving on. It's as if he's speaking at a funeral for an era. Now, of course, the end of The Hired Girl had been accelerated by the coming of World War II, as women were needed to fill jobs left by men and perform vital work in defense plants. This gave them new opportunities, and doubtless it would be hard to get them to return to that sort of low-grade domestic work, and certainly not at the same wages. And the industrial post-war explosion began to bring more of the electric servants that Nesbitt referenced. The two pieces contrast but fill in the same theme. The first was more personal, with the tribute to Effie and the story of how she tamed these wild boys and found a life for herself in a new world. But again, it captured the idea of the world as it was and how it was changing. The description of the world of the early 20th century is shocking, and most of us can't really imagine how challenging life was back then. But Nesbitt and those who are older than him could. To us, it might be a startling revelation. To them, it was a reminder of how far the world had come. Nesbitt's thoughts at the end reflected very much the spirit of the era in dealing with the changing world. It was acceptance, but he tinges that with wisdom and a bit of caution. He knows that there are challenges ahead. How well we've met the challenges that Nesbitt mentions and what others we face today are certainly matters for debate. He offers some real food for thought more than 80 years later as the world continues to change and we figure out how to move forward in it. It's time for me to close up the old snack wagon, but don't worry, we'll be back with another serving of old-time radio goodness before you know it. If you want to enjoy some of our longer form podcasts, you can feast away at my website at greatdetectives.net. Your emails are also welcome at adam@snackwagon.net.
The Old Time Radio Snack Wagon comes to you from Boise, Idaho. Your host is Adam Graham. Sound production is by Rhines Media, LLC. You can listen to past episodes of the Old Time Radio Snack Wagon as well as connect on social media at our website at snackwagon.net. Email suggestions for episodes to adam@snackwagon.net. This has been the Old Time Radio Snack Wagon.
Until next time, goodbye.